Hello, friends. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is my absolute joy to be able to welcome all of you to this special session on befriending your inner parts. We have people joining us here who have already signed up, and this is the very first session of our 6-part series on befriending your inner parts. And we also have people joining us who are still considering whether or not they will join and participate in the series. And we also have people here joining us for this session who are Sounds True One members, and I want to welcome all of you. I also want to let you know for this special session, we have with us Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS. Originally, his teaching partner and the vice president of the IFS Institute, Jeanne Catanzaro, was also going to be with us. She won't be with us here for this session. However, you will have the opportunity to be introduced to two IFS Institute trainers who are going to be leading and co-teaching as part of this special 6-week series. As you may or may not be aware, Dick Schwartz has published several books and audio programs with Sounds True, including the bestseller, No Bad Parts, a book on IFS and relationships, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, and a new workbook, An Introduction to IFS, bringing this new workbook alive through community engagement, working through some select practices together. That was the inspiration behind this series. And now it's happening. We're live together. And with that, Dick, I'm going to pass it over to you for this first session on befriending your inner parts.
Thank you, Tami, and thanks for that introduction. The only correction I'd make is that the workbook is called Internal Family Systems Workbook, not Introduction to Internal Family Systems, and is the book that this course is going to be based on. And I am really excited to introduce the course and bring up the end of it. And Jeanne will be there the last session too, so you'll get to meet her, sends her regrets and her love. And yeah, this is a big moment because for many years we've debated whether or not we could actually bring IFS directly to the public so that people could work on themselves using it, and had concerns because it can be delicate to go certain places in the inner world. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do that safely. And I think we've nailed it. The feedback I've gotten so far on the workbook has been very positive, and I'm very grateful to Sounds True and the team, along with Tami, for helping us bring it to the public, to the world, actually. And so, yeah, it's a very exciting moment in the history of IFS. And yeah, and I am very excited also that we handpicked a couple of our top trainers to help you, who will introduce themselves shortly. And we'll do sessions 2 through 5. And so this, yeah, the goal is to go through some of the exercises in the workbook and get you started on getting to know your parts and helping them get to know you, what we call yourself. And so in the next 6 weeks, we'll be going over the main concepts and practices, and we'll be doing a lot of these experiential exercises. So you'll get a chance to taste this model. So it was last December that Sounds True published this workbook, and Uh, Today is going to be focused on the material in the first part of the workbook, and I'm going to introduce the model to you. So let me see if Carmen and David could come out and just introduce themselves, because you'll be with them the next 4 weeks. And then I'll come back with Jeanne for week 6. So Carmen and David, come on out and introduce yourselves.
All right. Thank you, Dick. Hello, friends. I am Carmen Jimenez Pride, and I am super, super excited to be in community with you all and to spend the next couple of weeks exploring your system and taking advantage of this amazing workbook. So I'm looking forward to connecting, us learning together, and us growing together. Turn it over to you, David.
Hey everyone, I'm David Kitchings. I just echo what Carmen says. I'm so delighted and excited to be doing this with you. I see all the names coming up in the chat. Some we know. I love training with Carmen, and I just wish we could be in person, saying hi and connecting with each other, but this will be wonderful. So we look forward to starting next week and hope you have a first great night tonight.
Okay, thank you guys. Yeah, so give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to do tonight. So I'll start with a meditation, and then I'll go over the history of the model and introduce some of the key concepts and practices. And then we have a staff member, Sylvia, who's agreed to do a demo with me, so you get a better sense of how the model can work for people. And then ideally there'll be some time to do Q&A at the end. So that's what I have in mind. And yeah, to start, I'll start with the history, and then we'll do the meditation. So, and I'm doing this for people who don't know much about IFS and maybe aren't therapists. So ideally this will take care of a lot of questions you might have. So yeah, I've been at this 40 years now. I'm getting really old. And back in the early days, I learned it from my clients. I was working with population people, kids who had bulimia, and they started talking this language of parts, which was foreign to me at the time. But and they were talking about their parts as if they had a lot of autonomy and relationships with each other. And it was disturbing to me at first. I thought maybe these kids were sicker than I thought. And then I listened inside myself, and oh my God, I've got them too. And that helped me calm down and just get curious about the phenomena. And over time, I learned several things. One is that they're all valuable. So hence the title of one of the books Tami mentioned, No Bad Parts, that everybody has them, that we're actually born with them, either manifest or in potential. And they all have, like I said, these valuable qualities and resources for us. But trauma and what are called attachment injuries, which is basically equal to bad parenting, force them out of their naturally valuable states into roles that can be damaging. And the analogy, again, because this is internal family systems, and I come from a family therapy background, the analogy would be to a dysfunctional family where the kids in the family, because of the dynamics, are forced into roles that they don't like, but they feel are necessary to protect themselves or to protect other family members, and they kind of get stuck in those roles. So the same thing happens with our parts. And so much of psychotherapy and our culture has mistaken the part for the role that it's been playing. And when you think of it that way, and I did this early when I was first encountering these parts of my clients, I thought the critic was just some kind of internalized parental voice, and the binge was an out of control impulse. And when you think of them that way, it's limited in how you're going to relate to them. You're either going to try and argue with the critic or ignore it, or you're going to try to control the binge. And I was doing that, and yet my clients were getting worse. But I didn't know what else to do but to do more of that. And it wasn't until for various reasons that I can't get into time today, I actually started helping clients listen to these parts instead of fight with them, that we learned that they're not what they seem and that they're really desperately trying to help and think they need to do the extreme thing to protect you that they are doing, and that they're frozen in time, most of them, during a trauma in your background, and that they contain what we're going to call burdens, the definition of which is an extreme belief or emotion that came into your system from the trauma or the bad experience and attached to these parts. And then from that point on, sort of drive them like a virus. And so it was just a matter of getting curious and asking questions that I learned all that. And that most of these parts don't like the role that they've been stuck in. So that was all pretty wild and fascinating. And I think I had a big advantage in the sense that I hadn't studied intrapsychic process. And so I just came to the phenomena very open and without a lot of presumptions. And so to the degree to which the model seems very user-friendly is because I had to actually listen to what my clients were saying and believe what these parts were saying. And as I did that, I learned also that there were differences. And from my systems thinking and family therapy background, I tried to create maps of what I was learning in clients about how these parts operated as a system. And in doing that, I was looking for distinctions. And the big distinction that leaped out all these years ago was between parts who, before they were hurt or terrified or shamed, were these delightful inner children you've heard about, who we love to be around because they give us all kinds of playfulness and creativity and openness, innocence, and loving kindness. But when they get hurt, or they get shamed and feel worthless, or they get traumatized and feel terrorized, they're not so much fun to be around. And they're the parts, because they're young and vulnerable, that are most sensitive. And so they take in these big, again, what I call burdens of worthlessness or terror or emotional pain. And once that happens, once they get stuck with that, we don't want to be around them because they have the power to overwhelm us and to make us feel all that again and pull us back into those scenes. And so we have a kind of natural impulse to lock them away inside and try to move on in our life without feeling that anymore and thinking we're just moving on from the trauma, from the memories of the emotions, not realizing that we're actually locking away our most precious parts simply because they got hurt. So we call these exiles. And for these exiles, it's like insult to injury. The injury was the trauma, and the insult is you then abandon them. And all of this we'll get into in more detail. I'm just kind of giving you an overview for now. So exiles, and then once you have a lot of exiles, you feel more delicate, the world seems more dangerous, so other parts are forced into the roles of being protectors. And some of them protect you by trying to control the outside world so that nothing similar to the original trauma ever happens again. So maybe you have a part that keeps people at arm's length and doesn't let anybody close enough to hurt you again, or tries to make you look perfect, and so you don't get rejected, or tries to make you achieve at a high level to counter the worthlessness, and so on and so on. Many people have a part that tries to take care of everybody so they don't get abandoned, and doesn't let you take care of yourself. So these we call all of these managers, manager protectors, because they're trying to manage your life such that your exiles are contained and don't get triggered. And they have in common the desire to control everything, please everybody, and they're what other systems call the ego. They're just a bunch of hard workers, and they're young. They're like, in family therapy, we call them parentified inner children, parentified children in family therapy, because they're in over their heads. They're trying to run your life, and they're not equipped, but they're trying their best, and they get very strained and sometimes become these inner critics who are yelling at you to try and get you to behave. So those are manager protectors. And then the other class of protector acts in the opposite way, in a sense, because when the managers can't keep an exile from being triggered, and it gets triggered, and these flames of raw emotion burst out of your gut and threaten to overwhelm you, it's terrifying to other parts, and they will immediately go into action to get you higher than those flames, or douse them with some substance, or distract you until they burn themselves out. And so we call those firefighters. They're fighting the flames of emotion that are coming from these exiles. And in contrast to the managers, they don't care about the collateral damage to your body, your relationships. They just think they've got to get you away from that emotion right now, and to do whatever it takes. And so there's often a big, what we call polarization between firefighters and managers, because while they share the same goals of containing the exiles, they do it in opposite ways. Out of control seeming, and control, pleasing people and pissing people off. So that's the map of the territory. It's pretty simple, actually. And as I said, Carmen and David will be going into more detail about that map and other things. The big deal about IFS, though, and something I just stumbled into back in the day spontaneously, is that in addition to these parts, there is what I'm going to call the self, with a capital S, inside everybody, often kind of hidden, or what we call blended with these protectors, so that it's obscured and you're not even aware of it, and they're not even aware of it. And I stumbled into this when I got hip to the fact that these parts weren't what they seemed, and they deserved to be listened to. I began trying to get clients to listen to them, and found that I might have you listening to your critic, and then you're furious with the critic. And it reminded me of times when in family therapy, I might try to have two people talk to each other, and a third party jumps in and sides with one against the other, and it goes south. And so I began saying, could you find the one who's so angry at the critic and get it to just move out, step out, and not interfere for a while? And clients could do that. And when they did, or the one who's so scared of the critic, and get that one to step out, this other person would emerge who not only wasn't angry at the critic or scared of the critic, but had a kind of pure curiosity about why it did what it did, and also had compassion for the critic out of the blue, and was calm relative to it, and confident relative to it. And in that state, sort of naturally knew how to relate to it in a way that would disarm it. And so it could tell its secret history of how it got into that role, and it softened a great deal. And when I would do that same process of getting other parts to step back in other clients, it seemed to release the same person almost, with those same C word qualities, and four others. So we'll go into more detail about what we call the 8 C's of self. These are qualities like calm and confidence and compassion and curiosity. And then 4 others, which include courage and clarity and creativity and connectedness. And so when I could get people in that state and then have them relate to their parts, they sometimes would take over the session. They just knew how to do it in a healing way. And so that's the big deal about IFS, that's in everybody, can't be damaged, knows how to heal, both in the inner world and the outer world, and is just beneath the surface of these parts, such that when you open space, it pops out immediately. And like I said, can take over sessions. And that's, it was hard for me to square that with traditional psychology. And so it wasn't until I looked at some spiritual traditions that I could ground the observation, because it was hard to believe that self could be in people who had some of the horrible, horrible childhoods I had of my clients. So it's become a kind of spiritual idea that we're accessing something that many spiritual traditions have a word for, almost no psychologies do. And so that's the basic concepts of the model. The way it works is, as we'll see in an exercise I'm going to leave shortly, you will focus on a part, you'll notice it. I'll help you extend some of the compassion of yourself to it. In the first exercise, we're not going to have you get to know it much. We're just mainly going to have you help it trust that it's not alone by feeling your compassion and what we call self-energy. And then in a later exercise, I'll actually have you begin to get to know a part and use what we call the 6 F's to get to know it, which I'll lead you through. And then we'll do a break, and then we'll do the demo with Sylvia. So that's where we are. So yeah, I'll describe. Well, first let's do the first meditation. And to do that, I'm going to invite you to just kind of do a scan of your body and your mind, and just kind of notice what's happening in there. So notice places of pressure or congestion, stiffness, soreness in your body, some kind of pain, or other sensations that don't seem quite like you. Or you might notice thought patterns or impulses. We're just going to do a kind of inventory of what's going on in your body and your mind right now. These are what we call trailheads, in the sense that if you were to pick one of those and focus on it exclusively for a while, you would follow the trail to the part from which it's emanating. So these are all manifestations of different parts of you that often are using the sensations to try to get your attention. And so that's part of what I'm going to have you do. Any of those agitations or fogginesses or anything that doesn't feel like you, I'm going to invite you to focus on it, and then notice where it seems to be in your body, and kind of breathe into it. And then also see if you can help it notice the you who's noticing it. So in that sense, you're helping this part of you notice that it's not alone. Because many of these parts float around in there, feeling very isolated and lonely, not knowing about you. And it's only until you focus on them and extend this kind of compassionate, loving energy to them that they can actually feel you. They can actually know that they're not alone and that there is somebody in there that cares about them. So that's what this first exercise is about. It's really just helping you extend that energy, notice how the part reacts, might soften a bit or shift. Or you might notice that there's a block and you can't extend compassion to it. And the block would be another part that doesn't want you to, doesn't like that other part, doesn't like the original target part for some reason. And so if that's the case, you can just shift onto a different sensation or thought pattern or something and try to extend compassion and care to this other one, letting the first one know that you're going to work to get back to it at some point. So again, this is a gentle exercise to get started, where you're noticing, similar to mindfulness, you're noticing all this that's going on in there. But different from mindfulness, you're not just observing, you're actively extending love and compassion to what we think of as sacred inner beings. They're not just random thoughts and emotions or sensations. They're actually emanations from these sacred inner beings who are deserving of your love, even parts of you that drive you crazy, as you'll learn as we go through the book, aren't what they seem and are desperately trying to help, even though it might be misguided. So for now, we're just letting them know we get that from this place of self. As you do that, you might get some information from some of these parts about things they want you to know about themselves. But that's not the main purpose of this exercise. This is really just to remind them that you're there, that you care about them, and that they're not alone in that sense. And as you do that, you might notice less chatter inside. It's like all the little characters in Inside Out are calming down, and some of them maybe even going to sleep. So there's more space in your mind and in your body. So this can become a very simple practice. Just quickly reminding parts that you care about them and they're not alone. And noticing what happens in your body and your mind as you do that. Many of these exercises can become part of a daily practice. So IFS traditionally has been used as a psychotherapy, but increasingly it's used also as a life practice, in some cases a spiritual practice, meditation practice. So we do encourage you to incorporate them into whatever practice you might already do. And again, the big difference is we consider these parts as real inner citizens, and that there is a you separate from them who can be loving to them in this way. So whenever this exercise feels complete, then you can begin to shift back outside and take deep breaths if that helps. And then I'm going to offer a second exercise, a second meditation now, because it builds on what we just did, and is also in the book, and involves taking a next step in terms of getting to know a part. So we're gonna, just start by picking a part that either you met in this last meditation, or that as I was describing the map, you might have identified. Particularly pick a protector, maybe not an exile at this point. So do any of the managers I mentioned, do you identify with any of them? Most of us have some kind of inner critic, for example, or any of the firefighters, the impulsive parts. So any of that is fair game here to start with, to get to know. So take a second and pick a part of you that you want to get to know in more detail. And then I'm going to invite you to find that one in your body or around your body. Most people can pretty readily locate it. If you can't find an exact location, just focus on however you experience it. So if it's a voice, focus on the voice, or a thought pattern, or an emotion. And I'm going to have you try to get to know it and direct some questions toward it. And so I'm going to invite you to direct your questions to that place in your body or around your body. Wait for the answers to come from there so you don't think of the answers. And so we did the first two of what we call the 6 F's, which was to focus on a part and find it in your body, around your body. And now the third of the 6 F's is this question: how do you feel toward that part of you as you notice it there? In other words, curious about it, or do you not like it and wish you could get rid of it, or do you have some fear of it, that protector, or do you depend on it? So you have a relationship with this protective part of you, and the question is, what kind of relationship? How do you feel toward it? And for purposes of this exercise, we're going to ask all the parts that have these other feelings toward it to give us some space in there so you can just become curious about it. in a fairly pure way, to just open your mind toward this protective part of you. So I'll give you a second to try to get there. And it's okay if those other parts aren't willing to relax back and let you open your mind. You could just spend the time getting to know them and what their fears are about letting you do that. So don't try to get to know the target part until you do feel fairly purely curious about it. But if you do feel that, then it's safe to go ahead and ask. It's a very open-ended question. What does it want you to know about itself? And don't think of the answer again, just wait and come and see what comes from that place in your body. What does this part want you to know? And a good follow-up question for these protectors, which is another of the F's, is what is this part afraid would happen if it didn't do its job inside? So fear, what's it afraid would happen if it didn't protect you in this way? And if it answered that question, you learned something about what it was protecting. It might surprise you. And if that's true, then if it feels sincere, see if you can extend some appreciation to it, or at least trying to keep you safe that way, even if it's misguided or isn't relevant to your life anymore. Just let it know you get that it's trying its best to keep you safe, and see how it reacts to that appreciation. So this is one of the F's too. It's befriending the part. So the F is in the middle of the word, but we really want it to feel like it's no longer a villain in there, that you get that it's really, really just trying to help. And see how it reacts. Then another interesting question for this protector is, how old does it think you are? Not how old is the part, but how old does it think you are? Again, don't think, just wait and see what comes. And if it got that wrong, then go ahead and update it and let it know that you can handle more than you could back then, and how its protection might have been necessary back then, but you've grown up a bit. Sometimes parts are amazed at that information because they literally are frozen back there. They live back in those scenes. And then finally, thank this part for whatever it shared, and uh, don't be too frustrated if you didn't get very far in this exercise. Sometimes it takes practice, and sometimes these other parts aren't ready for this. They don't want you to get to know this protector. But if you did, if you got somewhere with it, then thank the part for whatever it shared. Let it know that this is the beginning of a new relationship with it, and that you're going to use the workbook to keep going with it. And then when the time feels right, you can begin to shift your focus back out here again and take some deep breaths if that helps. So welcome back. And those are just two samples of some of the exercises in the workbook, and some of the work we're going to invite you to practice again as this becomes a kind of life practice meditation on your own every day. So this is about halfway through, and we thought we'd take a very quick break, a couple minutes, and then come back. And Sylvia has very courageously volunteered to do a piece of work with me, because we did want to give you a sense of how this can be useful, and to have you get a picture of how it works. So let's come back in just a couple minutes. Okay, welcome back. And again, ideally, there'll be some time at the end to do some Q&A and also maybe get some reports on those exercises. But now we want to invite Sylvia to come out and do some work. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi.
So thank you for volunteering for this. And how are you feeling about doing this?
I can feel my heart pounding very hard right now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But as you thought about doing this, did you have some place to start in mind?
I did, and the meditation helped to get into that place.
Okay, so tell me a little more about what part you want to start with.
It's connected to something that happened yesterday for me, and it has happened before. And it feels a little bit like today right now, the nervousness, but it's
Mhm.
it's a little more. So, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to say what happened or you want to keep that private?
Um, I was in a place yesterday where I had to do something, um, just part of, some paperwork and things that I had to do. So I was in an office and basically something I had to do. I couldn't get away. Um, and I didn't want to be there. So I felt like I had very little control of what could happen.
Okay,
I was at the mercy of the people working there in that office.
I see. And so there was a part of you that felt powerless or anxious, or what was the feeling?
Yeah, all of those. I was feeling anxious. There was a part of me that wanted to leave,
Huh?
and another part that said, we can't leave. We have to stay. We have to do this.
Yeah, so that's what we call a polarization between two parts. So between those two, which would you like to start with?
Maybe the part that didn't want to be there, that wanted to
Okay.
leave and felt almost trapped.
Okay. So let's start there and go ahead and focus on that feeling and see where you find it in your body, around your body.
Mm. Definitely some pressure on my chest, and I also feel some tingling in my hands.
Okay, good. And as you
Yeah.
notice it there, those places, how do you feel toward it?
I understand why it feels that way. It's a scary situation.
Okay, so let it know that you can understand its fear and see how it reacts to your understanding and caring.
I feel like I can breathe a little better,
So it
like more
softens a
air
little.
comes in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, so let's just stay with it in this compassionate way for a little while. And as you do, just see if there's more it wants you to know about its fear.
Mm. It says that it's very scared that someone could be very mean to us,
Uh-huh.
um, and that something bad could happen during this process that we had to do yesterday.
Yeah. And as you learn that, how do you feel toward it?
Yeah, I understand, especially because we've had that happen in the past.
Okay. So maybe it's stuck back in a time when that happened to you in the past.
Mm.
Yeah. So at some point, maybe you can get more curious about where it might be stuck and there are ways to get it out of there. But for now, let's just keep showing it that you care about it and you understand, like you might one of your children, if you had any, that was just scared.
Mm. Yeah, every time I go there, and when you said children, and I imagine like it was a little child,
Mhm.
then again, I feel like I can breathe better.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. Hmm.
All right. So ask if it's okay with it if we go to the other part that told you you had to stay and get to know it too.
Mm. Yeah, it says it's okay.
All right. So focus on that one and find it in your body or around your body.
That one feels more around the head. It's more like up
Okay.
here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And how do you feel toward this one as you notice it?
Mm. I can see where it's coming from. I understand it's something that we had to do. Um, I think there's another part of me that feels that it's being a little rigid and
Okay.
mean. Yeah.
It's being mean to the scared one, or
Yes.
okay. All right, but let's ask the one who is trying to protect the scared one that way. Let
Mm.
us just stay curious about this one who told you you had to stay, even if it said it in a harsh way.
Right.
See if you can get back to just trying to get to know it.
Yeah.
Okay, and ask it what it's afraid would happen if it hadn't come in strongly like that.
That we probably would have left and not do what we needed to do. And that was very important yesterday. It had to be done,
Okay,
it says.
I can, I can I can hear its sort of sternness now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's afraid that that other part would have taken over and you would have left.
Right.
And then what would have happened? What would have been bad about that?
Um, Basically, we would have lost the 5 years of preparation and paperwork and everything that we did to come to this moment.
Okay, and ask this part if that's a common uh, argument inside of you that it has to sort of scold this scared one a lot.
I never thought about it like that, but it
Oh,
is true. Yeah,
it
it
is
is.
true. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I hadn't
Okay.
seen it before. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that can't be real. That can't be a lot of fun for this one to have to be hard on that poor scared one.
No, no, feels like an officer
Yeah.
type of energy. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. And ask this one how old it thinks you are.
Hmm. It said something like 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And maybe when you were those ages, it needed to be this way, but let it know how old you are now and just see how it reacts.
Hmm. Hmm. it's surprised. It's basically taking it in, it's going like, oh wow. So we done a lot of things.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So if it trusted that this was true and that you're more capable than you were back then, would it be okay letting you lead things and not having to be this little manager in there?
Hmm.
Just see how it reacts to that idea.
Yeah, it almost feels relieved.
Hmm? Yeah.
If I were to take charge,
Mhm.
it just almost like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
ask it if it really could trust that and it didn't have to keep everything going and keep it in order. What
Hmm.
might it like to do instead if it was freed up?
It says it has to see it before to believe it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So you got to earn its
Smart.
trust that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm saying if that panned out and you did
Hmm.
earn its trust, what might it like to do if it was freed up?
The first thing that came to me, something with the Caribbean. So like going to,
How's that sound? Yeah, it's
it sounds really good.
desperate for a vacation. It's been working so hard, right?
Yeah.
Let it know
Yeah.
you get that. It's just been working like crazy. It needs a rest.
Yeah. Long time, it
Yeah.
feels like. Yeah.
So let it know you're going to try to earn its trust that way.
Mm. Yeah.
And then the last thing we'll do uh, before we come back is let's bring these two parts together and have them face each other. And you kind of be their therapist or their parent. And just see if there's a way they can get along differently.
Mm.
Let's first just see how they react to seeing each other with you there.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that because the scared one says the only way that it would face the other one, it would be with me
Yeah.
holding its hand. Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead and hold its
Yeah.
hand.
Hmm.
Let it know you're not going to let the other one hurt it anymore,
Yeah.
and see if it's open to getting to know the other one.
Yeah. It says it's okay. We can get closer.
Good.
Okay.
And how's the other one
Yeah.
reacting to facing this one?
They're both in a like a curiosity energy, looking at each other, just observing each other.
Okay, good.
Hmm.
And maybe ask them this question. Ask if they have anything in common.
Hmm. The uh the manager, the officer responded that we're both scared.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let them know you get that and that you're going to be taking care of both of them now.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if they could
They're
trust
both.
that, say it
Mhm.
again.
No, no, that they're both are okay with that.
Yeah, and if they could trust that and could see that you were there for them, how might they get along differently?
yeah, it feels good to be the three of us there, and
Mhm.
feels softer.
It's great.
Yeah.
So maybe let them know if this feels true, that you'll keep meeting with them this way and helping them learn they can trust you. And they can also become more connected in there.
Mm. Yeah, they will like that, especially the scared one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that feel complete for now, Sylvia?
It does, yeah. Even my body feels different.
Good. Yeah, so many thanks for doing this in front of so many people and letting us get to know a couple of your parts this way. And like I said, it is important that you follow up and do it on your own. And if you do, this will continue to evolve and you won't have these big battles around episodes like that anymore.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I see Tammy's come back.
Hi, Dick.
Hi, Tammy.
We've gotten many very good questions from people, but before I go into them, I've also been following some of the comments, and some people are joining us who are new to IFS, and some people have different levels of experience. And I think it would be helpful at this point, before we go in to questions, if you'd be willing to recap the main takeaway points you want to make sure, especially for people who are new to the model, that they've received and that have hopefully landed for them so far.
About the model, about IFS?
Yeah. And befriending our inner parts. And in this
Yeah.
first session, what you want to make sure people are really comprehending.
Yeah, well, the demo with Sylvia was a good illustration of how she was in this tense situation and had this battle going on inside about whether or not to stay. And we can all identify with that. You know, any dilemma we're facing, there'll be one part that says do it, and the other says don't you dare. And if they're in there by themselves, they don't know you, they don't have a leader, then they'll just get more and more extreme on both sides. Just like kids in a family that don't have a parent. And so, and they're both in their own ways trying to protect you or trying, in some cases, protect themselves. And so that's a basic idea in IFS, that these parts are valuable inner beings that get forced into extreme roles. And you heard from the scared one that bad things have happened to it in the past. It's probably frozen in some scenes in the past where these things happened. And so it carries burdens about these situations that if I don't run, I'm really going to get hurt again. And that kind of burden will make the fear more extreme. And so this other one has to become more of a drill instructor, kind of sergeant officer, and can become quite harsh toward the scared one because of the fear. It said that if it doesn't come in that strong, the scared one's going to take over and make her leave, and that would sacrifice all this work she's put into this situation. So that's a very common kind of polarization that we all are aware of at times, and so this was a way to have her first get to know each one separately and extend some of that compassion to each of them. Let them know they're both valuable, and when I asked her each time how she felt toward them, there was a lot of self-energy. She said, I can understand why they did each of them. It wasn't like I'm really annoyed with the scared one because it bothers me all the time, in which case I would have had to get the annoyed part to step back. So anyway, the basic assumption that we all have a bunch of these parts, and they are like an inner family of kids, and they need leadership. And so as I had her relate from self, which I knew was self because she did have this kind of compassion and understanding for each right away, they softened, and her chest opened up, and the other one dropped its kind of military approach because it saw there was somebody else who could handle, and we learned that it thought she was a teenager and was kind of shocked to learn that she was older and could handle more. So all of that is in the process of one of the exercises I did earlier, which is to help these parts realize there's somebody else in there that can handle things. And so they're not alone, and they don't have to do it all themselves. And that actually does help them relax very quickly, as we saw. And then so one of the goals of IFS is helping these parts out of their extreme states to be more of who they're designed to be. Second goal is for them to trust self and learn about self and know that there is this self, which happened. Third goal was begun when I had them come together and face each other, which is to have them get to know each other differently and start to harmonize inside and work together instead of battle all the time. And so self can become their good inner therapist or good inner parent that way. And so there are these new inner relationships that start to build. And then when that's the case, Sylvia will be able to achieve the fourth goal, which is to stay in self in those situations and be able to face whatever the adversity was with a lot of those C-word qualities instead of either of these parts taking over some other part. So I don't know if that is getting at what you're asking for, but
yeah, it's good. It's helpful. I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions about the exercises that you taught that came in that I've culled from the questions. And a couple of people wanted to know, when I'm extending and sending compassion to this part that I've identified in the body, it lives here, am I sending compassion from my heart, from a certain place in my body? Is the self located somewhere in the body?
yeah, from the heart, basically. So what you find is when you access self, your heart opens up sort of spontaneously. I don't necessarily have to say extend it from your heart, but that's what most people experience, because that is a location of compassion.
And then we had several people who asked, when you said, when you're scanning your body, look for something that doesn't feel like me and something that feels like me. And they were confused by that instruction. And I wonder if you can help explain that a little more.
Oh, I didn't mean to say does feel like you. I meant to just say doesn't feel like you. So
okay. Can you give an example of what it means, something that doesn't feel like you?
Doesn't feel quite like you. It's yeah, let me just think. Sylvia had this pressure in her chest and made it hard to breathe. And if I were to ask her, she would say, that doesn't feel like me the way I am most of the time. So it's like that.
And then we had one other question about this first exercise of extending compassion. Someone said, how do I know if it's self energy that's sending compassion or it's a caretaker part of me that sending compassion.
Yeah, that's a little bit more nuanced, because there are what we call self-like parts that can imitate self and try to do it for you. And to catch those parts, it often takes a therapist or somebody who's very familiar with the work. There are some markers, there are some kind of tells that let you know that it isn't pure self. But I don't think we have time to go into that right now. But and I'm not sure that that's an exercise in the book. I can't remember. But yeah, that's a good question, because many people, when they go to try to be compassionate, they're doing it from an efforting part rather than the natural compassion that exudes from self.
And then you introduced the 6 F's. And I'm wondering if you can say a bit more and clarify how I can work with them as I become familiar with IFS.
Yeah, and that'll be some of the focus of the rest of the sessions, I think. But it's really just, again, because I like alliteration. It's just another way to organize the way to relate to parts. So, as I said earlier, the first F is to find or to focus on the part. So however you experience it, just focus on that. And then the second is find it in your body, around your body. And then once you've located it, there's this question, how do you feel toward it? How do you feel toward it? And that becomes what we call the parts detecting question, or the self-detecting question. Because in answering that question, you're telling me how much of yourself is present versus other parts. And it isn't just the content. So, I mean, it's obvious it's not self if you say I hate it. But sometimes if you say, I'm curious about it, but you have an expression on your face that doesn't really show that way, or your voice isn't resonant with self, then I might say, but is there some part that's afraid to let you get curious? And so, so that's the third F, and we stay with that until we get what we call a critical mass of self, enough self to get the ball rolling in a good way. And that would be, I'm really curious, or I kind of understand, like she said, and in the tone of voice and all of that. And so we don't have people interact with their parts until there's some degree of that kind of those C words. And so then when we're working with protectors, and the 6 F's apply mainly to protectors, there's this question, ask the part what it's afraid would happen if it didn't do its job. So again, fear is that F. And in answering that, you learn about what it's protecting, and then you can extend some appreciation to it. So that's to befriend it, is to get to know it and let it know you get that it's just trying to help. Even parts that you've hated most of your life, as you open to them in this curious way, you'll learn they're really just trying to protect, and then you can start a new friendship with them. So that's I think the 5th, and then the 6th is I forgot something.
Forgetting starts with an F. So that's someone will write it in the chat and
Yeah, no doubt.
And tell us here.
Okay, this one, flesh out. Yeah, Stephanie wrote it in. So there's a point where you start to get to know the part before you befriend it, and that's called fleshing it out.
In the second meditation, when you had us meeting this protector part, somebody wrote in getting to know a protector. the protector I picked was so deeply identified with the specific parent's behavior that I kept seeing their face. And I thought at some point I was missing something, because could a protector be so clearly associated with a parent's behavior?
Very much, yeah, that's not uncommon. And often that's because that part carries what we call a legacy burden. In other words, it took in the parent's energy for whatever reason, and it got stuck with that. And a lot of times that particular energy came from ancestors from, generations earlier, and just comes down through the generations, and could be related to a trauma that happened centuries ago. So that's a big focus now in the IFS world, is helping people unload these legacy burdens, because they're very powerful, and because you're kind of raised with them, often you don't even see them as a burden, and you're just kind of unaware of how much they're organizing your behaviors. So it's very exciting when we can find a part that carries that energy.
Someone else wrote in, they were working with an inner critic as a protector, and they asked, "What are you afraid of?" And the inner critic responded, "I'm actually afraid that you're going to die. I'm protecting you from death."
Yeah.
And this didn't make sense to the person in terms of the intensity of the response and memories they had from childhood and whatever might have been at risk in their life.
Yeah. So, I can speculate, but it'd be good for the person to follow up and keep asking, where did that fear of that I'm going to die come from? But again, it's not uncommon that that would be a legacy burden too, that might have come from some ancestor who almost did die or did die. And again, it trickles down through the generations. So yeah, it's just good to stay curious about it.
Gina writes in, "What does it mean when you ask a part how old it thinks you are and it says your actual age?"
Then that particular intervention didn't work, because there are times when I'm asked parts how old they thought I was, and they give me my age, and they say, "But you're still an idiot." So it doesn't always reassure parts. It's actually much more common, and kind of amazingly common, that when you ask how old they are, that you get a single digit. Most parts got their jobs when you were that age, and think you still are that age, and think they have to protect you now in the way that they did back then. And then there are parts that know how old you are. So it's just something to try.
We have another person who writes in, "I've been parentified since I was a child. I basically had to raise myself. And my adult capital S self is very tired. How do I access my higher self, or the 8 C's, when all I want to do is be a child who just wants to be taken care of for once?"
Yeah, well, I have that part too at times. So, there are times when parts will blend to the point where they're so tired and they want so much to be taken care of, they're not going to separate. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to listen to them and actually find somebody to take care of you, especially so many of us, not me, but so many therapists have these massive caretaking parts that take care of everybody else and don't let them take care of themselves. And they'll have other parts like the one that I shouldn't assume it's a she, but that the person just described, who are sick of taking care of everybody and just want to be taken care of. And they need to have a voice in this inner system. And so anyway, that's what's coming to me as you ask that.
Kristen writes in, is there a way to distinguish between a part responding versus what you may be thinking is a response?
Yeah. So part of the reason that I have people find the part in their body is so that when they ask a question and they get a response, they have a sense of where it came from. So if the response came from their head, then it's not from the part. It's thinking part trying to do the work for it and answer the question for it. But if the response came from that other place in the body, then you can trust the response more. And there are a lot of people who are so used to thinking the answers to these questions because other therapies actually promote those parts and try to analyze and so if you've been in other therapies, it's often the case that I might ask some of these questions and the thinking part's going to do the answering. But often the client will preface whatever answer with, I think this is what it is. And that's a dead giveaway. So I'll just say, okay, but don't think. Just ask the thinking part to give us a space to hear from these other parts that are in your body. So there's a lot to that question, but that's the answer I can give you now.
Karen writes in, what if your part is so blended in you that you can't separate yourself from the part?
So we didn't talk about this, but there's a technique in IFS called direct access. So that was true for you, Tami. I would say, let me talk to that part directly that is blended and won't separate. And I would say, okay, are you there? You say, yeah, I'm there. Okay. So you just came in and took over and blended with Tami, right? Is that right? Yeah, okay. And you don't want to separate, is that right? Yeah. And what are you afraid would happen if you separated from her? So I'll have a conversation with the part about the whole issue of unblending. And often just in that conversation, as you witness it, you're getting a little more separation from it. And then I can hand the baton back to you and you can finish up. Because just talking to me, you got a better sense of how it was different from you.
Stina writes in, you mentioned a couple of times that IFS gets to a place that spirituality seems to get to, but psychology tends not to. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that? For example, what elements of spirituality do you see that align with IFS?
So when I became convinced that self, what I'm calling self, was more than just another part, and actually, and a lot of the convincing was around how it couldn't be damaged and was intact in people that had horrible, horrible lives. I couldn't square that with my psychology training. And I looked into lots of different spiritual traditions and was amazed that each of them had a word for that, for what I'm calling self, and described it pretty much the same. And I wound up co-authoring a book on this topic with a guy named Bob Falconer. It's called Many Minds Oneself, if people are interested. The second third of the book is really on different spiritual traditions and how they describe basically the same thing that I talked about as self. And so that's the main way that I see IFS as being spiritual. There's some other things that I've been talking with you about that we don't have time for tonight, but I don't know if that's answering the question or not.
I think it's a good answer for now. And what I'll say is that there'll be more work coming from Sounds True with Dick Schwartz on the spirituality of IFS. So you can look to that in the future. Dick, at the very beginning of our conversation, now that we're coming to an end, I want to make a full circle. You said how this program, the 6-part teaching along with the inner workbook, the IFS inner workbook, is a way that IFS is being brought to people, to public access, if you will, not only through the IFS Institute training therapists, people working with a trained therapist, but now we are attempting in new and experimental ways to help people start to become, dare I say, fluent in the model and able to apply it in their life as a practice, as a growth practice, as a spiritual practice. And I wonder here at the end, as we're launching this 6-part course where people are engaging with some of these practices, if you could say a bit to encourage people and maybe give them some sense of orientation around this, because it is complex at first. It's not easy to understand right off the bat and work with. It takes some time and repetition for this language to become internalized. And I wonder if you can speak to that and how you see this unfolding. Something you and I have talked about that's so exciting to me is that IFS is actually becoming a movement. And what I mean by that is it's something that's available to so many different people in so many different arenas. And that's going to require this type of public access.
That's all true. IFS has become a sizable movement, and it is a bit of a dream come true for me, because this is a very different paradigm for understanding the human mind and relating inside to oneself. And for me, if we can do this for these parts of us, parts that have been ruining our lives, that we ordinarily fight with and hate, then we can do the same with people that are our enemies in general. And so it has big implications for helping the world, I think, and also the unburdening, especially the legacy unburdening. So yeah, I have big hopes for that, for this movement you're calling it. And that's partly why I'm excited about this, because we've been wanting to spread the word more to the public directly so they don't have to spend a lot of money on expensive therapy and can be much more accessible. And the more we can help people access self, the more their lives will improve and the more self they'll be bringing to the planet. And that's the ultimate goal for me, that there is a dearth of that at the moment, and there's a lot of insecurity as a result, and that if we can just all start moving in this direction, I think things can change quickly, but it takes a movement, it takes a village.
Just to let people know, as part of this 6-part series, we'll be exploring in future sessions, working with managers, firefighters, exiles, the self, and Dick will come back on with Jeanne for a final session, session 6, to answer your questions and interact again with our learning community. Also, I want to let you know that the replay of this session will be posted on the course platform within the next 24 hours for those of you who want to rewatch it and work with the exercises again. And additionally, in our upcoming sessions, there'll be an opportunity for people to meet together for the final half hour in reflection groups, where you'll have a chance to share your discoveries and understandings. If you're interested in joining the program, there's still time. You can, if you're on the player page, just hit the Learn More button and learn more. Just visit that link. And this is my chance, Dick, to say thank you. Thank you for your great work. And I am actually, just to say in a transparent way, here in Chicago with you. We're not in the same location, but we've been a full day in the studio recording together, and here you are doing this 90-minute session as well. It's been a good day of honest labor, friend. So thank you so very, very much from all of us here.
Thank you, Tami. Since I have been partnering with you, my life has changed. You helped launch that great book, No Bad Parts, and every encounter I have has been delightful. So I'm very grateful to you and to the team, and look forward to more adventures.
More self, friends.
More stuff.
Thank you. Thanks all. Sounds true. Waking up the world. Thanks, everyone.